And now, the thing is as well, is obviously we've talked about how the vast majority of the normal people in this country have been absolutely gobsmacked and aghast by what's happened in the fiscal event, and then, what's happening with the U-turn as well, all of the kind of stuff, all of the fallout politically, that what's happened from the U-turn and from the fiscal event and the budgetary concerns that we have had over the past few days since it was announced and since all of since the economy started tanking at the time. Most people, most normal people, have been incredibly perturbed by this. Hence the massive change in the polls. Right, the massive change in the support of the Conservative Party outside of their traditional base. Right, they fucked around and found out they messed with their voter base of old people and homeowners far too much. They thought they could, they could screw these people over with impunity, and it turns out that does not work. It does not wash with the British public, and they're being punished in the polls for it. You'd think that, but unfortunately, there is a very small section of the press who are so ideologically tied to quote unquote what they believe is true conservatism. That they are absolutely these people are angry that there has even been a U-turn over these policies that almost cause economic collapse overnight. And this is Mike Graham of Concrete Growing fame, who has hit out Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng over the U-turn specifically. And so we're going to enjoy them seething and coping over the single kind of silver lining of the events of the past few days, despite the fact that they're still continuing with the rest of the cuts, they're still continuing with the rest of the benefit cuts, they're still continuing with the tax cuts on on things like corporation tax, or not giving us the rise in corporation tax that we were promised by the previous administration that they have no mandate to reverse. So we're going to watch Mike Graham, and we're going to enjoy him coping and seething over the most minor part of the announcements over the past week.
Well, that's about tax and about energy. You can find out what you're supposed to do. But if you've got a smart meter, for example, the smart meters apparently haven't been updated to the new tariff. So you won't actually know what you're supposed to be paying. So your smart meter right now is probably about as useful as a chocolate fire guard. But if you've got a smart meter, I need to hear from you. I need you to tell me precisely what it's telling you. Because do you even know what your tariff is now? Do you even know what your next bill is going to be like? If the first bill arrives on your doorstep this morning is more than you can afford, what are you going to do about that? 0344 499 1000. But let's talk now to Sir John Redwood, Conservative MP for Wokingham. He's up at Birmingham at Tory Party
This guy speaks fast. I can't even put him on 1.25.
conference as well. Sir John, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. We've been speaking to Trevor Kavanagh from The Sun, who's got a column in The Sun this morning saying, let's not forget the real enemy is the Labour Party. Could you please remind some of your colleagues there to stop stabbing each other in the back and get on?
I mean, I find it incredibly frustrating in that these people are just so ideologically, not even ideologically, like this. You're getting the same kind of team sports mentality from the rightoids that you get from the centrists as well. In that the centrists will team sport their way in support of Keir Starmer, despite his treachery, despite the fact that he is lying and deceitful, and has abandoned his pledges that he stood when he was becoming Labour leader, specifically so he could get into a position of power through deception to then purge the left afterwards, right? Stalinist style. And then the right wing are doing the same thing as well. They will look at Keir Starmer, who's essentially giving them exactly what they want, telling them he's going to protect pension funds, telling them he's going to protect mortgages, telling them that he's not going to be even remotely kind of interventionist in the economy outside of a small investment project he's going to do into green energy. I understand that these people just get mad when they hear the word green, or even see the colour green. The whole British countryside has been ruined for them now because it is the colour green, and that reminds them of Caroline Lucas on the World Economic Forum. I don't know. But these people, they see Keir Starmer just giving them exactly what they want, just conforming to their ideology wholesale. But they are so kind of brain poisoned by all the team sports shit that they fully cannot be seen to be even remotely tacitly endorsing Keir Starmer's platform. So even as the Tories in power screw over their own voter base, they have to go, oh no, but they're the blue team, so that they have to be correct, even though the red team is giving us what we want as the quote-unquote party of business. Yeah, the British government has essentially just become the EPL. It's the Premier League now. It's just red team versus blue team. Doesn't matter what platform they support, or the effective utility of the policies that they support, or the externalities of the policies that they support. It's just red team good, blue team bad, or vice versa, depending on which team you support at the time. Because as I've said, what is it that Keir Starmer has said that anybody on the right of politics would disagree with? Given that the Conservative Party have just screwed over their own voter base in every possible way that they can, apart from looking at the state pension, right? They've committed to the triple lock on the state pension. That's the only thing they've given them outside of screwing over their pension funds and screwing over their mortgages. And so Keir Starmer's coming along and saying, we're going to work with business, we're going to invest in business, we're going to be pro-business, quote unquote, and then we're also going to protect this particular demographic that should be very conservative in the way that they vote. These people come along and say, well, actually, no, but because they're red team, that's bad, even though that's exactly the ideology that we purported to support for the last kind of 15 years or so, since David Cameron became the leader of the Conservative Party.
With governing the country.
Well, I think that's very good advice, Mike, and let's hope the minority that are being a bit difficult understand that. I'm not one to stop people having different views, but it must be done in a helpful spirit, and it must be about improving how we govern the country, because we will be judged in a couple of years' time by whether we made a good job of governing, and that immediately means solving the energy crisis for consumers by giving them some money back and lowering the bills, and it means trying to see off the recession, which is otherwise coming our way as we see the main central banks of the world jacking up interest rates and trying to create a big slowdown.
I mean, when close of play...
It's incredibly frustrating that the same deflection happens over and over and over again, where this massively sharp rise in interest rates basically overnight in response to the fiscal event is being framed as part of a global rise in interest rates by central banks around the world, when the central banks have been rising it slowly and over time to try and curb, inflationary effects. And the Bank of England has had to literally overnight go, we're having to jack up them to make sure that the entire economy doesn't collapse. These are two completely different phenomena with completely different sets of externalities, and the ways in which both John Redwood and Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng are trying to kind of equivocate between these two things is is an incredibly gross amount of obfuscation going on here.
On Friday and even late last night, I was convinced that this 45 pence tax rate had disappeared and would disappear. It now appears that it's not going to disappear, it's going to remain.
Concrete Mike needs his new supply of concrete materials, and he can't afford it unless he gets a 5% tax cut on his earnings over 55k, whatever it is.
I think that's a very good look for Liz Truss. What do you think?
I think it was unfortunate.
I mean, Tim Stanley, saying that Starmer was saying things right on Politics Live. I mean, that's why we're seeing millionaire donors to the Tories defect over to Labour, because we don't have a real democracy. We have two different colours of the same ideology that just pretend to fight with each other like it's the Premier League. And that we don't really have any actual choice over what happens with our country, because the politics are so consensus-based. To the point at which Labour are being to the left of the Lib Dems, at least in some respects, like it was during the Blair years. Remember Charles Kennedy being the left opposition to Tony Blair? What a depressing existence that was, where the leftist party, or not even a leftist, but when you look at the political spectrum, the closest you got to voting for a leftist party that could actually do anything with regards to changing the economic outlook of the country was the liberal fucking Democrats. I mean, I really like Charles Kennedy. I miss Charles Kennedy. And what's happened to the Lib Dems since he unfortunately passed away has been he's probably spinning in his grave right now. But we're reaching that same level of incredibly dull consensus politics where change doesn't happen and history is dead. And it's just millionaire donors fighting over their own football teams. That's what it is. Because that's why you were seeing the Labour Party court huge numbers of businesses at their conference, including, may I remind everybody, they were courting Royal Mail at the Labour conference, despite the fact that an affiliated union, the CWU, is on strike at the moment against that employer, and they get a stall at the Labour conference. How embarrassing is that? Standing up and saying God save the Queen. Honestly, God save the King even in that respect, because Queenie's dead, unfortunately. Like, it is just embarrassing. I can't think of another word other than cringe to describe what's going on with Labour at the moment. But, if you're a conservative person who believes in conservative, new fiscal responsive fiscally responsible, quote unquote politics, then why would you not support Starmer at this point? He's clearly trying to take the centre-right ground that was previously held by people like Tom Tugendhat and Penny Mordaunt.
I didn't recommend that tax cut to them. As someone who likes tax cuts, that wasn't on my list. When they said they'd do it, I was relaxed about it and would have supported them. But they've now decided it's too much hassle. So my advice to them now is stick with
I'm in the CW as well, and hence
the
the
plan
logo.
of lower taxes. Make sure enough money goes to those, particularly who don't have very much money, because we need to...
But why did you do huge tax cuts for corporations and high earners? This makes no fucking sense, John.
sustain demand and help them. And above all, let's bust that recession. Otherwise, it will be very difficult in the general election.
Yes, it will be. But the problem now for Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, though, is that people will think every time they announce a new policy, if you make enough noise and batter enough drums, they'll drop it.
Well, I'm...
Good! Welcome to politics. If you do bad things, people should be able to stop the bad things happening because they don't have popular support. That's what democracy is for. In that if your policies don't have popular support, you can't put them into power. That is why it is people like even Nadine Dorries are calling for general elections, because the mandate that they have is not what they're trying to put into practice with this policy platform.
I'm sure Kwasi will be aware of that, and he will now need to reassure us that everything else stands and that he's learnt the lesson.
But nothing else in the fiscal event is also from, like, the manifesto pledges. Again, things like operating benefits with inflation, things like not cutting public services, things like the basics of what levelling up is supposed to be, is using interventionist policy through the exchequer to try and get infrastructure up to where it is in the north of England than it is in the south. So that is extra gut through fiscal expenditure from the government, which you then can't claim that you're doing when you're being forced into removing new funding for public services because you want to fund tax cuts for the rich. This is completely nonsensical.
I think they regard it as a communications failure. So next time they want something bold, they should do a bit more preparatory work.
Yes, I mean, you've always been a very loyal cabinet minister, and outside of the cabinet, you've been very loyal to the party. Why is it that so many of your colleagues can't see that that's the way to be?
I've no idea.
But loyalty to the party should be loyalty to the people who got you elected. MPs should be loyal to the constituencies that elected them on the mandate that they had with the manifesto that they put forward in that election. That's how members of parliament work. The fact that they're trying to Mike Graham here is trying to imply they should have more loyalty to the internal mechanisms of the party rather than the actual people that they got the democratic mandate from. Again, these people do not believe in democracy. They'll shout and scream about democracy when it came to a referendum, and probably, to be fair, rightly so, given the amount of people who wanted to completely reverse the results of the referendum and why the second referendum policy from Keir Starmer in 2019 was a really bad idea. But then when it actually comes to the new implementing policy on the basis of a democratic mandate, it all goes out the window. It completely goes out of the window. I don't know how anyone can watch this shit. Normal people who just have normal lives and normal jobs, who see themselves as just like members of the working class or whatever, who probably are, at least materially, will look at this and go, actually, yeah, it's right for them to be anti-democratic. It's right for them to do it. How can they look at this? They something that is against their own material interests, and they're just unfortunately they're cucked little bitch boys. They're cucked. They're just cucked to an establishment that doesn't care about them.
I mean, some of them can't. Some of them have been disruptive to more than one leader. I can understand a disagreement in principle with a leader, but it shouldn't be about you. It shouldn't be about saying, well, I didn't get the job I wanted, so I'm now going to upend the leader. It should be about what is in the national interest. How do you help all your constituents? How do you help the wider nation to greater prosperity and freedom, which is what I thought we were about.
Yes. And in terms of things like the interest rates, I'm
going to have to go over again exactly how we got to this position, is that the media companies who stood to benefit from these libertarian reforms that were being put through by Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, right? These kind of reforms that were leading to the economic crisis that we have right now, that were in the interests of these media companies, were not given proper scrutiny during the hustings and during the leadership campaign. The only person who actually gave them any scrutiny at all was Rishi Sunak, one of the other actual competitors in the leadership election. The media downplayed the threat of Liz Truss. Plenty of the media supported Liz Truss in her desire to become Prime Minister, precisely because they wanted these reforms implemented, because it was within their own economic interests to do so. Remember, they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders, these media conglomerates, right? These publicly traded media conglomerates. They have a responsibility to their shareholders to generate the maximum amount of profit at any point, right? So, if they engaged in any behaviour that would negatively affect those profit margins, the people who are being appointed into these positions of high levels of these boards by the shareholders, they would lose their jobs overnight. They are forced to, whether or not they agree with it or not, or they probably do, that's why they're in the positions they're in the first place, they are forced to, by these fiduciary responsibilities, to engage in this stuff, despite the fact that it has negative economic repercussions for the rest of society, because it's within their own economic interests to do so, and that's how the system works. If they stop doing it, they get fired.
Pound-dollar ratio and the bond yields and all of those things. I mean, aside from interest rates, we see the markets have somewhat calmed down from the sort of febrile.
And you can see, like even basic material analysis of this. Like, they did the policy. It meant that we had to have a huge buyout of bonds, and also mortgage rates are going up massively. And he just sweeps it away. He just says, it doesn't matter. It's fine. None of these material things matter, but as long as people conform to the right ideological mindset, as far as I'm concerned. Materially, can give a shit. Don't care. It's hand waved away in one fucking phrase by Mike Graham here, by Concrete Mike.
Days of last week. I mean, interest rate wise, do you think it's right that the Bank of England should be blamed for some of this problem?
Well, of course they should. I mean, remember that everybody in the debate tells me that the Bank of England is independent on interest rates, and it is true that they uniquely have the power to say what the official bank rate is, and they announce that from time to time. And I don't think any politician in power tries to change their mind on that. It's done independently. But what isn't so independent is whether they buy and sell bonds and create a lot of money. That was first done by Chancellor Darling under Gordon Brown, and has then been done by successive chancellors. The most of all was done by Rishi Sunak, and that was a joint policy. It had to be agreed with the Chancellor, and the Chancellor and taxpayers underwrite the bond buying of the Bank of England. So I think the Bank of England did get it wrong over the last few weeks. I think they threatened the market with too big a hike in mortgage rates. They then told the market they were going to be selling bonds to get the price of the bonds down, which is the way you put the mortgage rates up. And then when that went too far, the Bank of England changed its mind and said, you know what, we didn't mean that, we'll buy bonds for a bit instead. So it's been pretty erratic. And I'm now concentrating on what happens when we come to the end of the few days when they ask.
So news just in from John Redwood MP. The Bank of England should have let your pension funds collapse. He thinks it would have been absolutely fine to just collapse the pension funds for no good reason.
Supporting the market, because my message to the Bank of England is try and create calmer markets and don't threaten the markets again with sky-high mortgage rates and bond sales, because that would destabilise us all over again.
And what about people who this morning are waking up to the sort of the first day of the new dawn in terms of energy bills and energy prices? Because I think a lot of people aren't that clear precisely what is being done. The government is giving money, I think to the tune of £66 a month from this point on for about 4 or 5 months in a row. But, you know, what should people be looking at if they suddenly get a bill that lands on their front doorstep, which they can't pay? What are they meant to do about that?
Well,
Tough shit. Tough shit. There you go. That's what Jake Berry thinks. We'll come to that later.
they should know that the government has put a cap on it all in terms of how much you pay for each unit of energy you use. So, you know, if you turn all the heating on and leave it on for too long, you're still going to end up with a very big bill.
Yeah.
But there is.
I think it just shows you how little interaction people like John Redwood here have with regular members of society, right? Obviously, he lives in a pretty well-off neighbourhood anyway in this constituency. But the fact that most Tory MPs just have never actually met any poor people at all, do they not understand with the bill hikes that have already happened before the bill hike from October, the huge amounts of society, they were already not even, being incredibly thrifty with the amount of electricity and gas that they used, right? I've still not turned the heating on. Even at this point where it's getting this cold, the heating has not been on at all. Our boiler has been set to just keeping the water heated since May at this point. I think it's April, May time. Heating's just not been on, because if we did put it on, that would be a huge amount of money that we probably just couldn't afford to be able to put on. And that's the case, probably even worse. Like, I'm in a pretty good position in a dual income household where, the rest of our outgoings are pretty low, because neither of us drive, neither of us have to spend a huge amount of money on transport in the house. That, we don't actually have to worry that much. We just would rather not be paying huge amounts for energy bills. We want to be able to keep them down. But for some people, that what little that they use of the heating and the electricity, right, for necessary things to be able to function in society, even after that, they're still penny pinching. The idea that that people like John Redwood think that people are just using too much energy, they should cut down consumption and they'll be right as rain. It just shows how little they actually engage with the reality of life for some people. As Jack Monroe famously put it in the article that they wrote regarding this issue, unfortunately, once you run out of money, you can't just divide your zero into smaller chunks to make sure that you can pay for everything else. Like, you can't. The square root of fuck all is, unfortunately, still fuck all. And that's the position that huge amounts of society are in. And we're already seeing from people, from the fiscal event that we've just had, that they don't care about these people because they're happy to slash benefits, slash welfare payments, slash the safety net that's supposed to be in place to deal with the fact that these people were on hard times already, and the times are going to get even harder as the winter comes across, and we're going to see deaths. Unfortunately, we're going to see people pass away because they have to choose between heating or eating.
Is that cap on it, so if your use is similar or moderate, as most people's has to be, then you're not going to get the huge surge in the bills that would otherwise...
We're at the point at which Martin Lewis is on Good Morning Britain saying, I've run out of ways to help people, and people asking him about what he could do about increasing mortgage payments, and he was like, I don't know. Fingers crossed, mate. Hope you keep your house.
...have happened because of the level at which the gas and electricity prices reach. But the bill is going to be more than it was before the price cap was raised. And to help with that, the government has obviously given the £400 to every household. It's given extra money to pensioners, and it's given quite a bit of extra money to those on benefits on top. And they need it because the bill is going to be quite a bit higher than it was before the end of September.
Right. And a final question, Kwasi Kwarteng's speech this afternoon, does he walk into the job as Chancellor and keep it until the next election? Because there's a lot of people who wonder whether he's going to last.
Well, I hope he does, because I hope he doesn't make another mistake or have to do another U-turn. What he's saying about growth is right. What he's saying about how lower taxes are a good idea is right. Indeed, if you set some lower tax rates, you collect more revenue, which is a double win, isn't it? We've got more money to spend on public services and the people...
He's just spouting, like, oft-debunked Laffer curve economics that we all know is nonsensical, at least up to a point, right? Like, obviously I can understand why the Laffer curve made sense when you were reducing taxation on the highest from 90% down to 70%, right? I get it. But it doesn't work from 45% down to 40%. You're already on the lower end of the Laffer curve, mate.
People who are making the money are happier and are more likely to come here, stay here, invest here, create jobs here. That's a good message.
But there's no evidence that this investments are actually going to happen, John. There is evidence that it's not going to happen. We already have evidence that these cuts to taxation do not actually do anything to drive growth or investment. All they do is put more money in the pockets of rich people that they then take with them to the Cayman Islands. Yeah, I'm with British Gas, so not only am I paying extra for my energy bills, I'm also paying for the people who are also the retailer and also the extractor. So I'm paying them twice essentially for all of this shit because they're the ones getting the bailout from the government because British Gas is owned by Centrica, and they also engage in fire and rehire. So I really need to change supplier at this point.
He should get it out there, and then he'll have plenty of support.
Sir John Redwood, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed, Conservative MP for Wokingham.
Ah, yes, the famously working class area of Wokingham clearly got their finger on the pulse here. There's also another video here about them not being conservative because of their tax cut U-turn from Tom Harwood of all people. Let's watch this.
What does this say about the rest of government policy? That simply when something difficult comes along, when something that might be unpopular, and earlier enough the Prime Minister has said that she's willing to be unpopular. Is that all melting away? Is this going to be what the government does whenever there's the slightest bit of opposition?
No, I don't think so. But I think the government is a government that listens. It's taken the temperature, and it's we are a democracy and we're a parliamentary democracy. So listening both to the public and of course to members of Parliament is very important. That's what they've done. This had become a distraction from what is a really good plan. There are many bits of this plan that haven't even.
I mean, it was a distraction, as I said, but it was a distraction away from the fact that you're deliberately trying to screw over people on benefits, migrants, trans people, like.
Even been reported in the last week and a half. I was with a group of SMEs yesterday, and when I drew their attention to the annual investment allowance being increased to £1 million, they were really delighted by that. It'll help SMEs, small businesses across the UK invest in our country's future, but that measure hasn't even been reported. If you look at what the CBI, the Confederation of British Industry, the Federation of Small Businesses and the British Chambers of Commerce have been saying, they've welcomed this growth plan. What we now need to do is get on and implement it.
Oh yeah, I'm not surprised that the Chamber of Commerce were happy about it. Oh, like essentially what is the union for bosses in the corporate world are like, oh, we're going to have loads more money that we can do to improve our balance sheet to be able to then, as I've said previously, send off to the Cayman Islands. Oh, this is fantastic. Oh, we love this. Oh, I wonder why the Chamber of Commerce was so gleefully happy about your policy of screwing over the poor to make the rich richer.
To make sure that people's wages can increase, and of course it contains tax cuts for everybody. It contains tax cuts for all 30 million of the United Kingdom's working people, which is really important.
But on this 45p rate, I believe we can have a look at what the Institute for Fiscal Studies said about it last week after the growth plan was published. They said this measure could be revenue neutral. Cutting this rate of tax might not cost the country a penny, indeed could help grow the economy, could grow the tax base, could help...
Citation needed.
Make everyone better off. What's the point in the Conservative Party if it can't deliver tax cuts that could make people better off?
Well, you've made the point about the importance of tax cuts to make people better off and, of course, also to stimulate economic growth. And as I said, this particular...
But there's just no evidence for this. There's just no evidence. There's not provided any citations. We have plenty of studies showing the failure of trickle-down economics.
We're talking about, the 45p band, was only a very small part. It was less than 1/20th, less than 5% of the package. We're freezing corporation tax, which was due to go up from 19% to 26%. We're keeping it at 19%, which is highly competitive. We're reversing the national insurance increase. We're bringing forward the reduction of the cut to 19p
all of
base
these
rate.
measures put together
All of
bring the tax burden down.
That's right, they do.
Down to what it was in 2018.
That's right.
Much higher than it was under the last Labour government. Indeed, your top rate of tax is going to be higher than every month bar one under the 13 years of Labour government. Are you comfortable with that as a Conservative Treasury Minister, presiding over a higher tax burden than Gordon Brown or Tony Blair?
Well, I'm comfortable with the fact that this new administration has come into office and it is reducing tax.
And yes, I wonder which of these administrations saw better growth. Was it Gordon Brown with his 50p tax rate, or was it George Osborne with his 45p tax rate? I think you'll find it was Gordon Brown with 2.5% on average rather than less than 1%.
We were going to see taxes go up significantly under the plans that we inherited just a few weeks ago, and we have rapidly reversed many of those plans. We've talked about the corporation tax increase, we've talked about reversing the national insurance increase. Those measures are far larger in terms of their financial value than the 45p rate. So this is a new government that is...
Actually, the 45p rate possibly might stimulate growth, right? If all of these policies, right, the 45p rate is the removal of that is actually the tax cut that might actually stimulate some growth, right? People who are on kind of the lower of the upper tier of the income spectrum might be able to actually go out and invest in, become like a sole trader of their own business or whatever. I'm not saying that, it's something that I endorse, but it might actually theoretically happen if you cut the 45p rate, which is one of the smaller tax cuts that they did. But by not raising corporation tax is something that when you rise it, you get more investment. As Rishi Sunak was saying, we've had decades of orthodoxy on low corporation tax, having the lowest corporation tax burden in the G7. All these threats of capital flight that have never actually come to pass if theoretically it was raised, as we've seen with other countries. Not gained. The capital flight has never come to us. We've not been the bargain basement that we were told that we would be. All it's done is mean that it means that profit extraction is much more lucrative because it doesn't get taxed as much, so the profits get extracted and turned into dividends and don't get reinvested. When you increase corporation tax and you make it less profitable for companies to asset strip and to take profit and to profit extract from these companies, by taxing that more, you incentivize people to reinvest it to avoid those taxes. So increasing corporation tax is the thing that would actually boost investment of all of these things that we're talking about on these tax burdens.
Reducing taxes straight away. Of course, we'd like to go further, but we'll do that in a way that is fiscally responsible, and that's why we're going to have the OBR forecast published in just a few weeks' time. And the purpose, by the way, of reducing those taxes is not just to alleviate the burden on working families, rich and poor alike, because these tax cuts we're going
1% of poor working families. Taxes over 10k is nothing. That is literally just like, for some people, it's probably less than 100 quid extra a year when their bills are going up by £100 a month. This is nonsense.
Going ahead with benefit everybody, all 30 million workers and many businesses as well. It's also to stimulate higher growth, and once we get higher growth, that increases the tax yield, the amount of tax paid in cash terms, which in turn creates opportunities to reduce tax. But we're going to be measured about that. We're going to do this in a way that is fiscally responsible. We think just now the measures we've announced are frankly the only ones that are affordable, fiscally affordable. So we're going to do these and we're going to get the economy growing and then take it from there.
You talk about what's affordable, and if we look back last week at what the International Monetary Fund said in this most extraordinary statement that they put out, a lot of people focused on what they interpreted to be the criticism of tax cuts there. But I was interested in one particular line in this IMF statement, which said it criticised large and untargeted fiscal packages. Large and untargeted fiscal packages. Now, to me, that...
Yeah, literally, you are to the left. You are to the right, of the International Monetary Fund. As I was mentioning on a previous stream, this is the institution that debt traps developing economies and forces them to get rid of their welfare states, right? This is an incredibly hawkish, economically hawkish institution that attacks left-wing movements in developing economies. And you are to the right of the International Monetary Fund. That's how far right these people are.
Can only mean one thing. This enormous energy plan that could cost up to £150 billion, that could be relatively open-ended. We know that the government's committed to it for 2 years. We don't know the price of energy over the...
Thank you for the bit, Festin Troy. But I think the untargeted stuff is the fact that they're explicitly saying that the tax cuts being across the board is unfair and regressive.
Course of that 2 years, and of course it's freezing the bills not just for the poorest, but for the very richest as well. Surely that's less fiscally sound than... And
I really think that he's looking too much. I think he's, by trying to say that it's an explicit relation to the energy packet specifically, trying to frame it by framing the issue with what's happening here with the IMF by kind of somehow divining miraculously that he understands that the IMF were critiquing the energy plan and not the taxation plan, which, as far as I was aware, was the main thrust of the IMF's argument. Is explicitly trying to pit regular people against the IMF, saying, IMF wants to take away your energy, wants to make your energy bills higher, when that's not the IMF criticism that they were giving. I can't believe I'm defending the IMF here. What the fuck? What bizarro world have I gone into? I've spent the whole of this stream defending Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson, Nadine Dorries, and the fucking IMF. What am I supposed to be doing?
A £2 billion tax cut.
Well, so we certainly make no apology for the energy price guarantee. Just a few weeks ago, households were facing the very real prospect of their energy bills going up to £5,000, £6,000, even £7,000 per year. And on her second day as Prime Minister, Liz Truss took decisive action to make sure that can't happen, to make sure the average house...
It's so obvious, like how desperate, how absolutely desperate is Tom Harwood to bootlick for this party, right? By deliberately framing the questions in such a way to give these people easy outs. By like, IMF say the energy plan is bad. Won't you assure our listeners and our watchers that actually the energy plan is really good and the Conservative government looking out for you? Wouldn't you agree with that, Mr. MP? Like, the lickspittle nature of this shit. I mean, obviously it's GB News, so I'm not surprised, but even so.
Household pays no more than £2,500. That was a hugely significant intervention, protecting, as you say, every single family and indeed businesses in this country. It'll also have the effect of reducing inflation by 5 percentage points compared to what it would otherwise have been.
Literally, gang, I would like to ask you a question where you can give the answer that you want to give, that you've been giving everybody else when they were trying to press you on something else. Would you like me to help you? Would you like me to put on your training wheels for this interview, please, Mr. MP?
Protecting all households, rich and poor, as you say, from those enormous energy bills is the right thing to do, because this is a government that stands with everybody, rich and poor alike. And I think, frankly, that energy price guarantee is probably the most significant thing the government has done so far. It's certainly far more significant. It'll do far more to help families up and down the country than the 45p issue, which is a relatively small part of what is a much bigger and much more important package that will help everybody and get the whole economy growing.
A universal price cap, a higher tax burden than any year under the last Labour government.
But a much, hang on,
retreating on
a much
number
lower tax
of
burden than was planned.
Promises that were made. What's particularly conservative about this government?
Well, what is conservative is the fact that...
Well, the fact that they're trying to fly brown people to Rwanda. Let's start with that. The fact that they're, being fiscally irresponsible, right? If you would say anything about what people genuinely believe the Conservative Party stands for, even though that's not really technically true when you actually look at the data on it or look at the policies that have been done. But if you ask people on the street what they believe the Conservative Party stands for, they believe in fiscal responsibility, right? That's what that's what regular people would say, is that the economy is safe in their hands. It's the same shit that happens with the Liberal National Coalition in Australia, for example. Well, the economy will be strong and safe in their hands, strong and stable, literally, what they believe with regards to their economic precepts, despite the fact that is completely untrue. That is what is conservative. What isn't conservative, as far as people are concerned, is plunging the gilt market, threatening people's mortgages because the Bank of England is forced to do a massive interest rate hike, and having to do £65 billion of quantitative easing to be able to prop up pension funds in the wake of unfunded tax cuts. This is the opposite of what people think of when they think of the Conservative government. What Tom Harwood is trying to imply here is that the only way to be conservative is to be a libertarian dickwad, rather than just kind of like a continuity neoliberal. The way in which the dial has moved so far, and again, they're allowed to move this dial so far because Keir Starmer is giving them continuity neoliberalism from their opposition. If there was a leftist opposition who was moving these people over on policy by giving us populist responses to this that benefit the people rather than the corporations, they would have to give a compromised position. But because there's no left alternative, there is literally no alternative on the left whatsoever, they can allow to frame this as a Conservative Party that either destroys our tax burden, completely eviscerates the tax burden, or is left wing. Because what is perceived as left wing, as far as the Overton window is concerned, is Keir Starmer, who isn't left wing at all.
In the first couple.
Yeah, it is like a party. It's even worse than a party political broadcast. It is the questions that get asked of the government by the government during PMQs. That's what it is. It is the does the right honourable gentleman agree that puppies are cute type questioning.
Couple of weeks in office, we've taken decisive action to prevent the tax burden going up as it would have done under the alternative administration and indeed under the previous administration. Now, obviously we believe in lower taxes, but we've got to do that in a way that is fiscally responsible. We've taken these decisive early steps. The measures add up to, well, you can see the blue book yourself, they add up to very significant amounts of money in lower taxation. We're reducing taxes for everybody, rich and poor alike. That'll help people in the cost of living situation we're in. It will also get the economy growing and thereby help people
No evidence for this.
earn higher wages in the future. We've taken decisive action to lower taxes. We've done it quickly. We've got a growth plan. The plan is welcomed by business organisations, big and small. And I think when we deliver...
Yeah, I wonder why it's just the businesses that have approved this and not the massive working class that are backing this. They should really show, right? If you're a working class person who's watching this, these people do not care about you. They don't care about your opinions. They just care about the people who hand them the brown envelopes under the table. That's it. That's all they care about. That's all they'd ever care about. You're right, boy meets Minnie. Hope you're doing well. But these people just don't care. They just could not give a one single solitary shit about normal people as long as they get the go-ahead from the Chamber of Commerce, right? If you're a working class person watching this, what do you care about the opinions of the Chambers of Commerce? What do you care when you see your mortgage rate rising, when you see your pension fund being threatened, when you see when you see the pound dropping against the dollar, etc., etc. When you see all of this shit, and you're getting you're getting less than £100 extra a year because of a 1% tax cut on your earnings above 10k. That's all you're seeing as a tax cut, as far as you're concerned. And you're thinking, oh well, and they're trying to position themselves as being in league with the Chamber of Commerce. Why do you give a shit? Why do you buy into this shit? Why do you buy into any of this? Get some perspective. Get some understanding of where your material interests lie. And it does not lie with these people. If you're enjoying this content, please, if you can spare, you can subscribe on YouTube. You can you can join even on YouTube for 99p, and you can become a subscriber on Twitch for $3.99. You can drop bits in Twitch chat if you want to support me that way, or you can also donate via Streamlabs as well by going exclamation point donate in the chat. If you're watching on YouTube when I upload this segment, if you can like, comment and subscribe, that'd be very much helpful. That's good. Boost this video in the algorithm. And if you also want to click the bell, it'll notify when I go live on YouTube too. Thank you very much for watching this particular segment, and I'll catch you on the next YouTube segment.